Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. Nicola Sturgeon, thank you very much indeed for being with us. Obviously, you'd like to win every seat in Scotland, but set the bar. What are you going to claim is a good performance for the SNP in this election, and indeed a bad one?
I'm not going to put a number on it. I think for politicians to start putting numbers on the number of seats they want to win is taking voters for granted. We are campaigning in every constituency across the country. We don't see any part of Scotland as being off limits. We're truly the national party of Scotland, so that is our ambition, to do well in as many places as we can. But there's a very clear message, I think, today on the final day of campaigning. If people don't want Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, if they want instead investment in public services, an end to welfare cuts, an escape from Brexit and Scotland's future in Scotland's hands, the way to achieve that is to vote SNP. The SNP is the challenger to the Conservatives in Scotland, and voting for any of the other parties risks helping the Tories. So if you don't want 5 years of Boris Johnson, vote SNP tomorrow to stop that.
Yeah, but the problem is that implies, doesn't it, that you do want Jeremy Corbyn?
I don't particularly want Jeremy Corbyn, but in a Westminster system, if there is a hung parliament, of course you have to choose. I don't want Boris Johnson in office, and while I'm not Jeremy Corbyn's biggest fan, I've said consistently and very openly during this campaign we would seek to be part of a progressive alliance as an alternative to the Conservatives. We would offer a minority Labour government support, not in any formal coalition, on a less formal basis than that. Of course, we would attach conditions to that, but we want to see an end to austerity. We want to see an end to these really punishing welfare cuts. We want to see our public services built up again. And of course, we would expect anybody looking for our support to respect Scotland's right to choose our own future.
But that would be a minority Labour government led by Jeremy Corbyn, so you're in a different position from the Liberal Democrats who simply say they couldn't support a Corbyn-led government. You could.
Well, I think the big worry people have about the Liberal Democrats, and Jo Swinson in particular in this election, is that they would actually, if the opportunity arose, put Boris Johnson into number 10. Jo Swinson was a member of David Cameron's government, and without Liberal support back then, we wouldn't have had austerity and welfare cuts, we wouldn't have the bedroom tax. So people are very worried about that prospect with the Liberal Democrats. I don't get to choose who the leader of the Labour Party is. If I did get that choice, I wouldn't have chosen Jeremy Corbyn. But I think the damage that Boris Johnson, a majority Boris Johnson government, could do to Scotland and to the UK over the next 5 years is immense. I mean, he poses a real danger to the prosperity of our economy, the health of our society, and I want to stop that. But, you know, before we get on to talking about what happens on Friday, people have to firstly come out and vote to make sure that Boris Johnson doesn't get that majority he's craving. And in Scotland, the way to do that, the only way to do that, is to vote SNP. The SNP is the challenger in every Tory-held seat. There's not a single Labour-Tory marginal in Scotland. So if you want to stop the Tories, you've got to vote SNP in Scotland.
I mean, isn't that really what you've done? The SNP have basically killed Labour in Scotland.
Well, you know, voters have made their choices over more than a decade now. The SNP have won elections in Scotland. We've won every election in Scotland now for quite a long time because people, I'm not saying they think we're perfect, but people like what the SNP has to offer. We offer an upbeat, optimistic vision of what Scotland can achieve. We invest in our public services. We've done our best to protect them from Tory austerity, although the impact of that has been severe, and we always seek to be honest with people about the challenges, but also how we go about addressing those challenges. So, you know, I think Labour have to take responsibility for their travails in Scotland, and the SNP will continue to campaign to stand up for Scottish interests, to make sure Scotland's voice is heard, to offer an escape from the mess of Brexit. And tomorrow, that does mean voting SNP so that we don't have Boris Johnson as Prime Minister come Friday morning. OK, let's get your conditions for supporting a Jeremy Corbyn Labour minority government. Referendum next year, is that one of them? Well, it's a principle that we would be expecting Labour to respect. I don't expect, and I'm not asking Labour to support independence. I'm not even asking Labour in the Scottish Parliament to vote for an independence referendum. I'd be delighted if they did either of those things, but I'm not expecting or asking for that. I'm simply asking and expecting a principle to be respected, which is that if there is to be an independence referendum and what the timing of that should be for the Scottish Parliament elected by the Scottish people to decide. It shouldn't be for Westminster politicians to dictate. It's effectively the principle of self-determination, which of course Labour support for many other countries across the world. But I would also want to see a real end to austerity, an end to welfare cuts, an end to the misery of universal credit until such times as Scotland is independent, more powers for the Scottish Parliament over employment law and immigration so we can increase the living wage and make sure that our own population needs are catered into an immigration policy. These are all really important things for Scotland, and they will be the things that, if the SNP does hold the balance of power, will be able to progress on Scotland's behalf. And all of that is so much better than the prospect of 5 years of a Boris Johnson majority government.
Nicola Sturgeon, I know you've got to go. Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us. We better let you go before you get entangled in that Christmas tree behind you.